So we launched a series of webinars, some in-person meetings and the rest webinars, to talk this over with subject matter experts really all over the country, but primarily in the Washington metropolitan area. And we were frankly surprised, weren't we, John, that we had a lot of people log on to this webinar series. I mean, there are 50, 60 people in each one, and most of them subject matter experts, and we just ran out of time. We tried to do these in about 90 minutes apiece. So the first one was on resources, priorities, and measuring results. The second on disruptive technology, and I know the three-star next to me is going to talk about that and additive manufacturing. The third was on AUKUS, which is, you know, a joy, but also something that we're going to have to produce for the Australians in terms of hulls of submarines, the Virginia-class submarines. Then a view from the Hill, and our friend Dr. Labs and Ron O'Rourke helped us out with the insider's view of the Hill because they're up there and they work for the Congress. And connecting the maritime industrial base in number 5 to national strategy, which we have been not so successful at, really until now. Now we have a shipbuilding office in the Pentagon, or in the National Security Council, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then recruitment trends and strategies to alleviate the labor shortage in the maritime industrial base. So during the webinars, we identified a number of places we can mitigate the 4 horsemen, and today we'll discuss the problems and some proposed solutions with our distinguished panel of speakers. So let me introduce them to you. First of all, immediately to my left, Vice Admiral Rob Goucher, United States Navy, a 1991 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He served on USS Flying Fish, USS Oklahoma City, where he was my navigator when I was in command and did one heck of a job. On to USS Maryland, SSBN 738 Blue. He commanded the USS City of Corpus Christi, and he was Commodore of Submarine Development Squadron 5. His flag tours include Director of Maritime Headquarters, N3 for Pacific Fleet, that's a tough job, Commander Submarine Group 9 and Task Group 114.3, and Director of Strategic Integration, N2 and 6 on the Navy staff. He's currently serving as the Commander of Submarine Force Atlantic Fleet. Our next guest, Dr. Eric Labs, is a Senior Analyst for Naval Forces and Weapons at the Congressional Budget Office in Washington, D.C. He specializes in issues related to procurement, budgeting, and sizing of the forces for the Department of the Navy and the Coast Guard. Dr. Labs testified before Congress numerous times, and he's published many reports under the auspices of the Congressional Budget Office, as well as articles and papers in academic journals and conferences, including the U.S. Naval Institute Proceedings, Sea Power Magazine, our own. If you don't have a copy, they're out in the lobby. The Naval War College Review and Security Studies, and most recently, and this is tough to get published in, only normally take very accomplished authors and PhDs, and that's Foreign Affairs. And the title of this article from March of this year is, Does America Face a Ship Gap with China? I commend it to you. He's given numerous presentations to a variety of industry, government, and academic offices. In February of 2019, Admiral John Richardson, as Chief of Naval Operations, awarded Eric the Navy Superior Public Service Award. He has a doctorate in political science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he graduated from Tufts University, summa cum laude in 1988. So, real powerhouse of intellect. We're happy to have you, Eric. From Ernst & Young today, one of our 2 sponsors for the event, the Managing Senior Partner for Government Consulting Services, Chris Pontrelli. He previously had a 25-plus year career in corporate business transformation. Chris started out as a Navy officer for 8 years, serving as an E2C mission commander and an instructor at Strike University. Delighted to have you, Chris, and thanks very much for your sponsorship for the event and the webinars. Our other sponsor for the webinars and today's event is Mr. Greg Summers, CEO of Orion Talent. He's been CEO since June of 2024, bringing 30 years of experience in talent acquisition and management within organizations ranging from startups to large cap corporations. Before joining Orion Talent, Greg spent 15 years at Cielo Incorporated. Since he's been at Orion, Greg and his team are committed to helping companies build stronger, more capable workforces through innovative solutions that attract, hire, develop, and retain highly sought after talent. including a deeply engaged community of veterans and military personnel. And the interesting thing and the good thing about Orion is they get to go into fleet concentration areas. So when they go out to San Diego, they are not a threat to the Navy. They're looking for young sailors who have already made the decision to transition out of the service and want to find meaningful work in their life after the service, whether that's a 5-year stint or a full career. And Orion is very, very helpful there, and they're helping to place some of these skill sets in critical needs in our maritime industrial base. Lastly, Greg earned a BA in economics from the University of Virginia while competing as a member of the NCAA men's lacrosse team. So good on you. Rob Gorham. Rob just flew up from Texas. He ran an Ironman this weekend. I think 14 solid hours he finished. I told him, don't hurt yourself. We need you on the panel. He's the co-founder and CEO of Blue Forge Alliance, a 501(c) focused on strengthening the U.S. Navy's submarine industrial base and maritime industrial base. Rob previously served as executive director of the Secure America Institute at Texas A&M University. He also led America Makes, an additive manufacturing facility for the Department of Defense, and he held roles before that at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. Rob has a bachelor's in aerospace engineering from Texas A&M, he's an Aggie, and a master's in engineering management from Southern Methodist University, same place our new Secretary of the Navy came from. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for our panel here today. Thanks for coming. Okay, with that, we have a total of 1 hour today, so 50 minutes left. What I'm going to do is I've asked the team to take about 5 minutes apiece and tell you a little bit about what's going on in their world and their neighborhood. And I think each and every one of them has a different piece of this problem that we're trying to attack today. And there's good news and bad news, and I told them, don't hold back on the bad news. Let us know, and let us know what we're doing to fix it. So I'll shift over to my battle buddy here, my former NAV, and now Admiral Goucher for the first set of comments. Rob, over to you.
Hey, sir, thanks very much. So first off, my job is to oversee the maintenance of the submarines that are in service. So that's the 4 public shipyards, Puget Sound, Pearl Harbor, Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and Norfolk Naval Shipyard. And I'll describe to you where we're at in our process, and this couples Admiral Houston, the Vice Chief, Admiral Downey, and I very closely to get after this problem. And the bottom line up front is we're not where we want to be in delivering submarines on time out of maintenance. And I'll just describe for you where we're at in that process. But I think everything I talk about in the public yards, you can find very similar issues in the private yards that are building our new submarines. So, and that's from my time walking around and talking to the folks over at both Electric Boat and at HII at Newport News. So to deliver a submarine, there's really 2 key things you have to have. You have to have good planning, and then you have to have good execution. And under planning, we're talking 18 to 24 months in advance. And so that's a long time. As a matter of fact, when we're planning a submarine availability, that submarine is probably forward deployed somewhere in the world. And things are going to break between the time we're trying to freeze the plan and the time that that submarine is going to show up in the shipyard. And so it makes no sense to the average operator, well, shoot, why wouldn't I fix it if I'm going to be in the shipyard for 2 years? Now that we've looked at this, at least I've had to look at it very closely, I realize there's a cost to that, and I might be better off only fixing the things in the shipyard that I absolutely have to keep that work package smaller. And that has to just do with the complexity of the shipyard and the constant pull for resources, from 100 different directions, where it may not be the most efficient way to do it, even though for that individual boat it is. So we're having to go rethink how we do that to make better plans. Our planning about 1.5 years ago, I think when Admiral Houston started the journey of having the submarine force commander as the overall accountable officer, we were at about 75% of our plans being ready when we started. Now we're up above 95%, so that's a big deal. And we think we're starting to see the fruits of that, but we have still a little bit of time, I think, before we're going to really, I think, be able to confidently say it's moved the needle for us. The other thing with planning is resources. So I've got to get the right number of people to be able to support based on what I think the workload's going to be. And I've got to get the parts ordered. So a little story on parts, and you heard us talk about it a little bit yesterday at the readiness If you look right now at the number of jobs that start without having all the parts ready, it's about 30%. So we start 30% of our jobs without having all the parts. And it turns out that of all of those jobs, 25% of them end up in some point where they have to stop work because that part still has not arrived yet. So we start off with 6% of our jobs that are going to end up in stop work. So that's not really where we want to be. So we need to go after that, and that has to get after our drive to get all of our material ordered prior to the availability. The other key thing for the ships is what we call open and inspect, and that is really understanding the condition of the ship before we start the availability. Because the better condition that I understand, the less likelihood that I will have growth work. And it turns out that even if I am nailing it and I am on time with everything, if the wrong thing breaks in the last 2 weeks of that availability, I am probably going to deliver it late, right? So if I didn't plan on it and I find it at the end, I may not be able to recover. So we have to be able to get into things that we can't see and get that growth work sorted out. And that has to do with really doing maintenance on the ship to go do that discovery before it even gets into the shipyard. And so we're having to drive that. But that's a cost to the operational commander, and that's why you have the submarine force commander kind of in charge of the overall effort, because I have to be able to balance that and go explain to the operational commander how he's got to give me a week by the pier in Guam in order to get that ship back when he needs it in 2 more years. And so those conversations I do not think we've been having historically, and we're having them now. The other half, so that's planning. The other half is execution. And in execution, the things that trip us up are technical resolution. So I get to a point in the procedure and I got to figure out what to do. And so I have to stop the job and then go get an answer. We already talked about contingent material and parts. Rotatable pool. So these are things like pumps and valves that are, maybe a bespoke component that we don't just buy from industry because we have a shelf full of them. I have to take it and then go refurbish it. So I need to go to an inside machine shop to go refurbish that pump or valve. I can tell you our inside machine shops in every single shipyard are overloaded. So I need capacity there, so that slows us down. Certainly, having enough labor, we get pulled a lot of different ways, and our particularly our big shipyards, they do more than submarines. So they also have to balance aircraft carriers, and then many have what we call other production work, where they maybe are supporting intermediate level maintenance. We used to have tenders, and then we had ships intermediate maintenance facilities. We kind of consolidated all of that. So the shipyards also have to provide for the submarines that are just operating, doing 1 month availabilities, instead of the 2 or 3 year availabilities. So all that pulls on those labor resources. And then there's test failures. So I get to the end, I've done all the work, and I go to test it, and there's a failure. Now, sometimes that is on us, and it's a poor craftsmanship issue, and we have to go fix it again, and that's unfortunate, and that's what we're always working on getting better at. But people will be people, and will make mistakes. And then other times it's because a boundary fails. So I go to pressurize a system. The valve I fix worked perfectly fine, but I can't get enough pressure to test it because some other valve that I didn't work on fails because it's been sitting dry for 2 years, and now it's seeing pressure for the first time. And that gets back to this growth and discovery that we've got to get after. So those are the things that trip us up in our availability. And there's probably 100 more, but I'm just kind of giving you the big picture as I see it. So where's the opportunity? So I think one opportunity is outsourcing work. About a year ago when we were looking at availabilities, we would be planning availabilities with 87% in some availabilities of the resources that we know we're going to need. And Jim Downey and I kind of looked at everybody and said, well, why would we have a plan that only has 87% of the resources? And it was kind of, well, that's the way we always do it. And so we've had to say, don't do it that way anymore. But we also don't have more shipyard workers. And so reaching out to industry is how we're looking to fill that gap. And so we've steadily been raising the amount of outsourcing that we have been pushing out, and we hope to push even more out to the companies that can come in and help us fill some of those gaps, so that we want to be manned at 100% planned, which is shipyard workers plus outsource, before we start any job. I already talked about component repair. I think there's an opportunity to figure out where we can ship things So if there's, Middle America has the opportunity or has machining capability and can do the work and we can get them certified, I think we have to look for those opportunities to get after some of our component repair. And I'll be very candid with you. I've sat in meetings and the supply side is the ones who are managing the rotatable pool components. And they'll say, hey, I'm not getting things turned in. And then I say, well, okay, shipyard, why aren't you turning them in? I said, well, if I turn them in, they're not going to get them back to me for 4 more years, so I'm better off holding on to it and trying to fix it myself. And I go back to the supply guys and say, is that true? And they say, yes, but if you don't turn them in, we're never going to get, so we get in this do loop we can't solve. So we have to really get after solving that do loop. So that's a big thing that, again, Jim Downey and I are pressing hard on the teams to get after. I need structural engineers. The reason I need structural engineers is a lot of our work comes from our unrestricted operations program. So this is where we have to look at the hull of the submarine and make sure that it can withstand operating at submergence depth. And we take that very, very seriously. So I need engineers to be able to go in and look at the condition of the hull and tell me if I have to do critical maintenance or not. And so it has to do with the amount of corrosion that I planned when I built the submarine versus the actual amount of corrosion that's in there and whether I'm kind of on plan or off plan, because that drives a lot of the maintenance that we'll have to do. And it also gets me to flexibility. So if I might be at the point where I'm going to go in the shipyard because my operation cycle is up, those structural engineers are who I will turn to say, can I get another 12 months so that I'm not just sitting idle or I'm not going into a shipyard that's already over capacity. And so I need those engineers to make those assessments, and that just helps give us some flexibility so we can level load our yards. And then the big opportunity I think we have is in new technology, and we're driving super hard at that. John Rucker at PEO SSN, Todd Weeks at PEO SSBN, and of course Jim Downey and Scott Brown at NAVC are driving for this new technology. And so a good one that I would like to get after is, how can I reduce the amount of time that the submarine has to be in a dry dock? So how can I do tank inspections? How can I get underneath the molded in place coating on the hull and see what the hull looks like, from an integrity standpoint? Because the way we do it now is I have to go take that mold in place coating off so we can see the hull and do a series of hull inspections at key points. Well, that's all work that gets added on. Then I got to put it back on, it's got to cure, and all that gets done in dry dock. So if I could get out of dry dock, then that would give me a huge advantage in being able to cut the amount of maintenance that I need. And then, of course, additive manufacturing. So we've talked ad nauseum about supply chain challenges. I've talked to you already about contingent material and parts. Hey, if I just had a good library of pre-approved, pre-vetted parts that I can go to an additive manufacturing machine, I can go to industry, I can go to academia and say, print me that, then that would be a huge game changer, I think, in our ability to get after our part shortages. And I know we're going after about 6 different metals by 2026. We think we will have enough experience to be able to really cut down on the amount of paperwork that it takes today to be able to get things certified. And when I say paperwork, but it's really the package that says, hey, this component can be used safely as a replacement for the original part. And so the early stages now, we have to be very careful to make sure that we understand it very well. But the team tells me by 26, we think we will have enough data for certain materials to be able to say we can just print them and install them and test them. We're not even going to give them a different part number. We're just going to call them the part. They'll be exactly the same as the original manufacturer's part. So that's my kind of rundown of the challenges and opportunities as I see them for the maritime industrial base.
Hey, Admiral, thank you very much. And Admiral Goucher is to be commended for not only his drive and his enthusiasm, but also some innovative solutions. So on additive manufacturing, we're going to talk more about that. I'm going to let the other guys talk too here. But I was impressed when I met the AMRON. That's something that Admiral Goucher created, the Additive Manufacturing Squadron Commander. So he took an existing former squadron commander, Captain Jason Deichler, Commodore Deichler, and put him in charge. He was down in the Danville facility when I toured on Industry Day with Matt Zirkle from Serco sitting in the second row here, and just eye-watering what those guys are doing. And it gives you direct input. I mean, he was taking pictures of what was going on real time, and Admiral Goucher was sending me text messages. Hey, I saw that. 3D printing of titanium. Think about that. If you know metallurgy, that's pretty impressive. So we'll talk more about that, but let me go to Dr. Eric Labs for the next comment.
Thank you, Jamie, for that kind of introduction earlier. I want to say before I begin my remarks, I'm going to state at the outset that they are my own and they do not represent the Congressional Budget Office or the U.S. Congress. I'm required to say that. It's no secret to this crowd now that the state of naval shipbuilding in the United States is facing enormous challenges that are greater than anything that I have seen in my 30 years as CBO's naval analyst. Jamie tasked me in this panel to sort of tee up some of these issues and set the stage for ideas, policy options, and paths forward that other smarter people in this panel may have. So to that effect, let me highlight 3 key issues that I have been discussing in various forums over the past year. First, the cost of shipbuilding is growing across the board, dramatically and substantially, so much so that it is hard to see where it stops growing and at least levels off in the near future. Right now, the amount of money to complete ship programs that have already been authorized and appropriated by Congress has tripled between the 2024 budget and the 2025 budget. If you look at the cost to complete bills associated with funding in the 2024 FIDUP compared to the 2025 FIDUP for the same years, it has grown from $3.4 billion in cost to complete bills to over $10.4 billion. 46 ships currently under construction have cost overruns today. And unit prices for major ships, such as destroyers and submarines, have grown enormously in the past 3 years, attack submarines, for example, by nearly 50%. Closely related to that now is the time that it's taking to produce those ships. We used to build destroyers and amphibious assault ships in 5 years, attack submarines in 6 years, aircraft carriers in 8 years. Now it takes us 9 years to build destroyers, amphibious assault ships, and attack submarines. Think about it. That means it takes us longer to build a destroyer or a submarine today than it took to build a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. The sum total of these effects are the Navy is getting fewer ships than it otherwise could have, and the fleet itself is smaller than it would otherwise could be. Specifically, if we could still build ships at the rate of those historic intervals that I just mentioned, we'd be well over 300 ships today. The Navy has lost or will lose 213 ship years between 2020 and 2040, or between 15 to 20 ships per year during many of those years. In an unfortunate coincidence, the period of greatest loss occurs between now and the mid-2030s, with a loss of around 20 ships per year for most of those years, and they are mostly attack submarines and destroyers. Why is the Navy in this state? Well, there are many reasons, some of which I will list here, and we can elaborate in the discussion as others sees fit, but in no particular order. The decline of the U.S. manufacturing base over the last 40 years, and the consequent decline in the number of Americans working in the manufacturing sector. The difficulties in hiring and retaining skilled labor in the nation's public and private yards. Until relatively recently, the decline of vocational technical schools and the view of many that everyone should go to college rather than pursue a trade. The increase in the demand signal from the Navy for more ships without the base of workers in industry to meet that demand. The increasing technical complexity of Navy warships. The Navy's requirement and design process is, shall we say, imperfect. COVID effects and overhang, especially in supply chains, parts, and as Jamie mentioned, inflation. There's a lot to talk about there, and I wouldn't say that that list is even exhaustive. But I will close on this thought, and it's a thought that I've emphasized when I testified before Congress on similar issues a few weeks ago. To solve these problems, nothing is more important than addressing the critical labor shortages that afflict all of the shipbuilding and public maintenance yards. For years, recruitment at the yards has been hard. Retention has been a greater problem, especially in the critical trades of welders, ship fitters, and pipe fitters. Many of the yards report attrition rates in the touch labor force of 20% or more. The Navy actually just testified recently, first-year attrition is 50 to 60% in some of the yards. In the critical trades I just mentioned, the attrition is actually running at 30%. Any policy that improves the labor situation is worth considering, though in my view it must start with pay. Without fully addressing the challenge of labor, all other efforts are going to be marginal at best. Thank you.
And Dr. Labs and Ron O'Rourke spent a bit of time with the Center for Maritime Strategy in preparation for this, in preparation for another study that we're doing on the Allied Maritime Industrial Base. They recommended, and we followed suit, and taking a look at their reports, which I'd commend to you, from the Congressional Budget Office to the Sea Power Subcommittee back in March. So Dr. Labs from CBO, Ron O'Rourke from the Congressional Research Service, and Shelby Oakley from the GAO, and all three testified. This is great stuff if you're interested in understanding problems and answers. And one of the things that struck me from Dr. Labs' statistics. Both he and Ron just have the most incredibly footnoted reports with studies to back up everything they say. And I don't think I'll goon this up, but if you go back and look at, you know, SCN money, ship construction money, amortized to today's rates, since 2003, we've been spending $5 billion on shipbuilding every year to meet the requirements of the 30-year shipbuilding plan. But in 2003, we had about 300 ships, and today we have about 300 ships. We haven't gone up. And the goal was, in the last administration, 355. Now it's 381. So we've definitely got a problem we've got to resolve there. Let me shift over to our next speaker, Chris Pontrelli from Ernst & Young. Chris?
Thanks, Admiral. It's a real privilege to be here today. I've got a chance to reconnect with some old classmates and shipmates, and it's nice to see everybody in the room today. So in my intro, you might have noticed that I don't have a significant amount of government consulting experience based on my background in the commercial space. So the lens I'm really bringing in on this is a transformation lens, and in particular, experience I've had in an activist shareholder environment where you get somebody outside a firm coming in, everyone wants to give everyone lots of advice on how to do things better, and so that's the general area where I'm starting from. And I'm going to really focus on three main areas. One is going to be around capital allocation strategy. What do companies and organizations like shipyards do with their funding? Second piece is going to be around what I would call transformation management office, or how am I tracking a business case and how am I realizing those benefits, and what we would see in the commercial space. And then the workforce issues that we touched on with Dr. Labs. What I'm not going to touch on is everyone's well aware of the pay gap, and lots of people are working on that. I'm going to take that another level down into what we're looking at from a commercial standpoint. So around the capital allocation piece, you know, to me, after having gone 58 years of my life and never read a single GAO report, and now having only read GAO reports for the last month, this issue around capital expenditure and the capital infrastructure, the state of that infrastructure in both the private yards and the shipyards, to me, is the seminal issue here. It is very difficult to have a deep, heavy production schedule and at the same time sharpen that saw and replace the capital structure. In a commercial organization faced with a similar set of challenges, that replacement and recapitalization of the business would be the priority. And that has to be done, obviously, in a way that's not disturbing the ongoing operations, right? You have to get the ships out of the yard, we have to get them repaired, we have to get them built. Every effort should be focused on bringing, whether we have to bring workers in from offshore or redirect the workforces to get that capital replaced. Now, I worked some of these numbers backwards in terms of, you know, level of expenditure. The numbers are the numbers, whether it's $25 billion from the Shipyard Act, is it $28 billion, is it 12 over the next 5? When I back up on those numbers and just look at the state of commercial investment in business, those are not overwhelming numbers. If you just go look at what a General Motors or a Toyota spends on capital expense every year, you'd be amazed. And these are companies that have been in business for 120 years, have well-established capital cases, right? So there's obviously have to repair the equipment and replace worn-out equipment, and I've got to expand the shipyard. That would be where my entire focus goes, primarily to get that put away as an issue so that the shipyards can expand and continue to do their great work. I do not see this happening from the private shipyards. If you step back from a pure mercenary financial standpoint, the market capitalization of these companies is not sufficient to do this. The market cap of HII is about $9 billion, okay? That means that the book value of HII is less than their revenue stream. General Dynamics will pick them apart, right, from a market cap. 70 billion market cap, 48 billion of revenue. Some people would say that 20 billion of that is just with Gulfstream alone, okay, on the valuation. They're basically trading at book value in terms of market cap to revenue number, thereabouts. Break out the Marine Systems number. They do not have the balance sheet to be able to afford that and maintain any kind of semblance of a relationship with Wall Street. So that money is going to have to be put, whether it's a direct national subsidy, and I don't know if as Americans we don't want to use that word subsidy, but you look at what China's doing from a subsidy standpoint, it's going to have to be a direct input to those businesses. And same thing for capitalization of the public shipyards. I think those numbers are good, 6% of construction costs. Those all make sense, but it's got to get done as fast as possible and as quickly as possible. Just to give you some sense of these numbers, if any of you own Apple stock, it's lost $600 billion in value in the last 4 or 5 trading sessions. And so when you start stepping back and saying, okay, is $25 billion for shipyards a lot of money? Of course it is in the public sector, but compared to the capacity of the planet to do this, it's not, and it has to be the focus. What I will say as a non-starter in the commercial world, and I keep reading this in the GAO reports, is you're spending $1 billion on incentives, you're investing $2 billion, and you can't track that number back to a benefits realization. That is a non-starter in the commercial world. We've done a lot of that work. There's plenty of capabilities around tracking that, whether it's a financial outcome or a production outcome. The methods to do that are well established and would be baseline. And then lastly, on the workforce, a couple of crazy ideas here. If you're going to give giant subsidies to these shipyards, the use of restricted stock units and the use of performance stock awards to the workforce is a critical element that could be used to compensate people. It's the only way to get management and the workforce aligned. I think on the public shipyard side, whatever capability we have to start to break that pay structure away from the government service schedule and use things around incentive compensation. Again, commercial business, you're behind on a program, not providing incentives to the workforce, the industrial workers. And then last piece, I think everybody's instincts on the value of a college degree and the workforce. I think a missed opportunity for the shipyards, both public and private, is the longevity and durability of these jobs. That is one of the main psychological reasons that we've determined people are avoiding these jobs. It's not the work itself. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And, I couldn't agree more on the subsidies. If you look at China, we just had our book launch here this morning that really chronicles the atrophy of our commercial maritime industry. Significant subsidies in Chinese shipyards to support 5,600 Chinese commercial ships at sea under a Chinese flag, and our yards struggle. When you shift over to the military yards, they're trying to get more competitive on wages, but somebody down at Newport News was telling me, you can make $19 in the shipyard and you go outside the gate and Subway's paying 21. So it's something needs to change. And thank you for that insider's view. Let's take a look at labor here with Greg Summers from Orion Talent. Greg, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with your distinguished and knowledgeable group. I hope to pull my part. We as a group, Orion Talent, have been a part of the working sessions and conversations, exchanging some ideas and information on how to support and solve the labor shortages that we're dealing with in the maritime industrial base. And it is quite a challenge. Some of what was shared earlier, I'll touch on a little bit, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper. For those of you who are less familiar with Orion Talent, Fogo gave a lead into our organization. We've been in business for 30 years now, started by service members who were in fact looking to help fellow active duty service members transitioning out to get meaningful jobs in the workforce. And that's really where we focused our energies. Over the last 10 years, we've expanded into the civilian world, but our mission is still the same, to help companies attract, hire, develop, and retain talent. And that's the space we sit in. So that is the lens through which, as I think about our observations, I'll share here with you that span from a macro perspective. So Eric will likely have details on this piece as well too. But if you think about it from a macro perspective, we look at statistics that say by 2030, 2.1 million jobs in the manufacturing sector will remain open. Right? If you look at it from the other lens, from the workforce side, in the next decade, 56% of the labor workforce in manufacturing will hit retirement age. So we're hitting it on both sides with demand and supply challenges changing. But I think what I might just add as a general perspective is just the micro view. So if you imagine we've been in business for over 3 decades, we've talked to thousands of people, and in fact, have over 3 million people in our database today that we actively stay in touch with just to understand what their interests are, where their interests lie, and what they're looking for in work. And I want to just sort of take that lens to share with you 2 things. Who are we looking for, and what are they looking for? And the first thing I would say is just to add on to the point that Admiral Fogo mentioned earlier, we do still very actively help veterans find meaningful work. But when you look at the numbers, in any given year, about 180 service members make the decision to transition out. Only about 10% of them have what we would consider skilled tech expertise, so to move into some of the critical roles that are in the shipbuilding industry right now, like welding, machiners, pipe fitters. So those are roles that are in high demand right now. But if you just look at the numbers, only 10% of the veterans coming out will be able to transition immediately into those roles. So what that tells you is, even though we will absolutely tap into that workforce, it's not sufficient. It will not close the gap that we've got. So we absolutely need to look into the civilian workforce and to the developing workforce to try and bring individuals into this space. The next thing I'll just mention is around the who, the generation. So it's Generation Z, and I think some of you might know that generation well, but I think one way to give perspective to that is just to tell you a little bit of a personal story. I am from Philadelphia and born and raised, not West Philadelphia, but either way, Southwest Philadelphia. And for those of you who are familiar with the Philadelphia area, back in the 70s and 80s, the Philadelphia Navy Yard was bustling. I mean, it was really bustling. Everyone in South Philadelphia knew somebody that had a connection to that shipyard. And so, 30 years on, it may come back on again. But we're talking about bringing in a totally different generation. So we're 2 generations removed that we want to attract for that workforce than were previously in that workforce before, when that shipbuilding center and maintenance center was up and running. Right? So we have to make sure that we're focused on how we communicate and how we engage with the interest with that specific demographic, because it's really significant if we're going to want to try and close the gap there. The next thing I'd talk about would be the what, right? So when you think about that specific generation, what they're specifically looking for are things that tie into who they are personally. So they're pragmatic, they're digitally native, and they're socially conscious. So if you think about it, certainly pay is a big consideration. We've got to solve that problem. What I think we really need to do is frame the opportunity in a different way than we're currently doing right now. And there are a lot of instances where we don't have a realistic job preview of what they can expect, not just on day one, but in years 1, 2, and 3. And given what I've heard here today, and certainly what I know from other conversations, there's a significant amount of innovation and technology entering the space right now. So for a population that's digitally native, to paint a picture of an opportunity for the long haul, for a career which, by the way, will span at least the next decade or two, where they can develop skills that tap into their interests from a technology perspective, is a really critical way for us to be able to close that gap and appeal to the interest to the population that we're really trying to serve here. And I guess I'll close with one thing before turning it over to Rob. The socially conscious piece. I can't think of another more important initiative to engage youth in right now than helping to protect our nation. So giving them an opportunity to participate in this initiative and giving them meaningful work means that you're tapping into what they're looking for. So hopefully I can add some more contributions to the conversation. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, and Greg. And then, your comments, just want to make a couple comments on your comments because things popped into my head. One, how you go about finding the right place for some of these transitioning veterans, even if they're only in that 10% diaspora that are qualified to go in. We hired an intern at the Center for Maritime Strategy 2 years ago. He's a young kid from Cornell University School of Labor Relations, and he was good. So when he graduated, we offered him a job, and he took it. So that's Nick Weissing. So Nick wrote an article for our online journal called The Mock, and I review all those, make sure that we're not saying anything untoward. It was on the Transition Assistance Program. And I said, well, what do you know about it, Nick? You never served in the Navy or anything. He goes, oh, we study this in labor relations. And, oh, by the way, did you know that as a sailor, a U.S. Navy sailor goes through the Transition Assistance Program? It's run by the Office of the Secretary of Defense. You're not allowed to bring industry in and give them a pitch. And I was like, wait a minute, he's looking for a job. Yeah, but they're not allowed to come in. There's a rule that says you can't bring in industry and say, hey, if you're looking for an opportunity, here we are, a la the shipyards. I just thought that was dumb, and so did he. And then we took the whole team up to Philadelphia Shipyard last August or September as a guest of TOTE Services, which is a vessel construction manager for the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel for the Merchant Marine, and walked all over that yard. And Admiral Goucher and I have both been in a lot of shipyards in our time. He used to have oversight of Puget, which is a pretty nice yard. When you walk around Philly, there's a lot of work to be done. Hanwha just acquired it. And I can imagine that a Gen Zer would walk in and say, hey, this ain't Google. There's no turf, grass, nice restaurants, air-conditioned spaces. So it's a tough sell, and we're going to have to figure that out. Okay, on to Blue Forge, Rob Gorham, our last speaker, and then we'll take some questions. Rob.
Okay, thank you, Admiral Fogo, and thanks for letting me spend a few minutes talking about Blue Forge. Like Greg, I'm humbled to be here. Unlike Dr. Labs, I don't have to give a disclosure statement. But as Admiral Fogo pointed out, I'm a Texan, and so I am obligated to give the official greeting of Texas, so howdy, y'all. Blue Forge Alliance is a nonprofit. We are a mission-driven organization for one purpose, and that's to accelerate and revitalize an atrophied defense industrial base. We talk a lot about at Blue Forge how we're going to do it. We talk a lot about the sense of urgency, and certainly for the last 2 days up until this point, I personally get a sense of urgency. Everyone is desperately trying to do the right thing at the right moment. And so we talk a lot about that. We use words like speed, access, and scale. And for Blue Forge to maintain its relevancy, we have to make sure that we do it with speed, access, and scale in mind. Do things faster, with more organizations, and move the needle are things that we think about a lot. We're partnered with the Navy's Maritime Industrial Base. Mr. Sermon leads that organization along with Ms. Jones to assist with galvanizing and uplifting our suppliers, our shipbuilders, to ultimately allow them to get to the point where we're not having to have discussions about problems. We're talking about celebrating solutions. We do that by increasing capacity, capability, resiliency through 3 pillars. We do that through advanced manufacturing, supply chain optimization, and workforce development. We're also, did my mic just go off? It did. Testing. Can you still hear me? Okay. We're also partnered with the Navy on the AUKUS Pillar 1, and so as you continue to engage with Blue Forge, you'll see us involved in that as well. Like everyone here, we're very keen to maintain a hyper-focus on impacts and outcomes. So we do track a lot of the work that we're doing across things like how much is the supply base production increasing, things like our acquisition cycle times improving, things like how is the industry responding to sequence critical materials, and what about days of delay? Are we seeing a reduction in the days of delay? And what about hiring? Are our numbers getting better? Yes or no? And we're seeing major improvements across the board in all 5 of those areas. And those aren't just the areas that we're measuring, but those are some examples that we're absolutely focused on. What does Blue Forge look like today? We're actively working across 43 states. We've roughly are currently engaged in around 400 different suppliers and over about 600 projects. And so I just say that because there's a lot of goodness that's happening across the industrial base, and we're proud to have a small role in that. Going back to some of the impacts, I'd just like to share about 6 or 7 sort of top-level examples of things that we should be very excited about. You know, I wake up and just like all of us remain frustrated. It's what seems like a constant negative news cycle, but there are some really good things. When you walk the floor, I'm sure you see tons of energy. We've seen companies disclose that through some of the work that they've done with the MIB and in partnership with Blue Forge, that production output is increasing by 50%. We've seen companies demonstrate a 100% increase in capacity for things like valve body production. We're seeing schools double their welding training capacity, just like what we've just got through talking about. That can't come at a better time. We're deploying curriculum into high schools to get people excited about opportunities to select a box. I don't want to go to college, but yet I'd like to go into the industrial trades. We're training and placing veterans, as you heard Greg talk about earlier. We're using welding cobots to boost first-time non-destructive test pass rates. And we're printing valves and housings, and we're saving tons of delay days. You know, in a nutshell, just to kind of summarize what Blue Forge is, we continue to try to measure our effectiveness by the value we bring to our industrial base partners. the value we bring to the United States Navy and the value we bring to the shipbuilders. We have a lot of work to do, and we're going to maintain as fast as we can the momentum we started, and look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And, one of the things that Blue Forge has done that came to my attention is on non-destructive testing with radioactive source. They're trying to figure out how to take the person out of the loop and do that with, autonomous systems so that you don't have a guy with the source come down. It's got like a camera front on it. Everybody has to clear out of the area, and you lay out the police tape so that nobody gets overexposed. Then you take the film and then you go back to the lab and have a robot or a drone do this is much more effective, doesn't burn up personnel, doesn't expose people to, some ionizing radiation, and it gets the job done equally as well. So you're about 85% person out of the loop in some of the work you've done, so well done. We came up with a series of questions from the 6 months worth of webinars, but I see we're at 10 minutes. So I want to give the audience here, we've got a packed house, and thank you so much, all of you, for coming to see this panel of experts. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and if we run out before time, I got plenty. So there's a mic over here, and I don't know if there's a mic on that side, but if you'd like to ask a question, please step up to the mic.
See, we've solved the problem.
Yeah, there you go. Okay,
Over to you, Admiral.
while you're thinking, I got a few questions. So on supply chain resiliency, for the group, I don't know if you guys have any brilliant ideas, but how can we help the maritime industrial base further diversify and strengthen our supply chains to deliver in a more timely manner? I think additive manufacturing is part of that, and for Admiral Goucher, you look out in the crowd here, I'm sure there's a bunch of manufacturing gurus. I spoke to the Marine Manufacturing Association the other day, and they were, itching for, give me a demand signal. Tell me what you want me to do. So, what do you need from them, and how could we take this facility that's down in Danville, Virginia, that's next to the community college, and scale that across the 1,300 community colleges in America? Obviously, you wouldn't do it 1,300 times. That costs too much money. But, pick a few, and maybe the one that's out in Congressman Garamendi's district, he's talked to me about San Francisco. What do you think?
Well, sir, I think that's exactly what we want to do, and we've actually done some of exactly what you said. I'm actually handing jobs out to different universities. So the Naval Academy has built one, and they're working on another one. Yeah,
Good.
we cleared a on-site analysis report that we couldn't get out of the supply system. So the approach you're taking is exactly the types of things. And I think it's an all-hands-on-deck effort. So it's that and anything else we can do to get after these supply chain issues. I think the part that makes it difficult is we have to release exactly what we need, with the technical specifications in a format that industry can use and turn into a part we can actually use. And I think some of this is just understanding, because not everything is suitable for additive manufacturing. There's some parts you just, are better off to machine than use additive manufacturing. And there's some materials that we're not sure about yet. But I think what I've learned over the last year is every time I ask somebody and they tell me no, 3 people later tell me, well, yes, or maybe at least. And so I think that we're still on that journey, and we just got to keep pressing forward on it. So.
Yeah. So it was down in the facility, there was a demand signal from the submarine force, and Rob, you can correct me on the numbers, but it's something called a trim and drain cord, which is a connector with a flange on either end, and it has a venturi for a restriction of backflow in that connector, and it's made out of a stainless or an Inconel. The back order to do that through a casting and forging facility was over a year. And how long did it take you to produce it down there?
It was a couple months, and it's going through testing right now at Pearl Harbor to go get installed on a submarine. So this is a sub-safe part, level 1 part. We're going to have to go test, and so we're using it. And frankly, Naval Reactors is in front of this as well. So
Yeah.
They're already building parts that will go in the reactor plant through additive manufacturing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the Q-COSAL stuff, which is the nuclear stuff, and SubSafe, and that program grew out of Scorpion and Thresher. And to have the confidence in additive manufacturing to say that it's safe to put on the ships, and the testing to prove that is Absolutely wonderful. Now we got a crowd. You guys thought about it. Sir, tell us your name and your
This is
question.
Steve Moretto, Department of Navy. This question's for Rob Gorham. I recently found out they have a Triumph Fund along the Gulf Coast of Florida where they match money if you can create 60 jobs. And so if you're interested in, building, shipbuilding capacity, industrial base, how could Blue Forge help folks leverage that money, and what other role could you have in helping people, build capacity along in that area?
Yeah, great question. Look, we talk about braided funding a lot. And, at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot of people from a lot of different resources to solve the challenges that we have. And those are perfect examples of how we can leverage existing programs, existing applications, and industrial base that already exists. But I'm going to answer your question by also doubling back on what we just got through talking about around resiliency. I had literally 2 hours ago a CEO from a company come up to me and say, I don't really need clarity on orders. I don't really need guaranteed contracts. I'm a very healthy company and I have excess cash. What I just need to know is how to get involved. I need to know what certifications I need to put in place, and I need to know that at some point when I do that, I can at least show up on some supplier list at a shipbuilder so that at some point I can be considered for the job. And so I think it's a combination of we want to figure out with you how to get involved with that program and also take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of manufacturing capacity that exists across the country, and we just need to do, in my humble opinion, a more diligent job of bringing those folks to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Aral. I'm with Fairmont Consulting Group. We're an aerospace and defense-focused consultancy. Admiral Goucher, earlier in your address, you mentioned that the Navy was exploring opportunities to outsource a lot more repair and specifically component repair of submarine and I figure surface warship as well parts. Could you elaborate on what sort of steps the Navy has been taking to grow the ecosystem for that? And do you imagine building a market that, somewhat equates to like what we see for aero engine overhauls? Thank you.
So I think the major step we're taking is NAVSEA is going to put in place what's called an IDIQ contract, which is a kind of centrally managed contract that we'll be able to put money in. So then as we need outsourced labor, we can just write it against that master contract. So we started this effort probably about 8 or 9 months ago. We think it will be in place here in the next several months. There's a few delays in getting the contract reviewed, all the legal things done, but I think certainly by this summer that will be in place. Because right now each individual shipyard has to do their own. This will be a centrally managed one, so as we see the need, we can just put our finger on the scale and be able to write against that contract.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, sir.
Adam Siegel, Insight Through Analysis. Let's do a step back and think about the historical. In many ways, the Navy for decades has been paying attention to supply chain and funding when there's a shortage of demand to keep people in business. Let's do it different is shipyards have had probably the best apprenticeship schools in the country. You look at, like, for example, Newport News, I think it's over 100 years, and they've had vice presidents come out of their apprenticeship school. I mean, people who spend 40, 50 years there. Has this just been finger in the dike as the whole thing atrophies? Or, what are the lessons from what's been going on, and why then are we in such a bad situation now, considering that in many ways, this has been paid attention to with resources against it since, even with the decline in the industrial base in the 90s. It's been, I've been around this for 40 years. There's been money and attention going to this over the 40 years.
Eric, would you like to take that?
Sure. I agree with Adam that this is something that every time I've visited a shipyard over the course of my 30-year career, I've seen the apprentice school down in Newport News, multiple times, and those resources have been going in there. My reaction to that is, I think, in part, the reason why we're still in the state that we are is that there are other stronger currents that have been flowing against shipbuilding. One is the increasing demand. So the apprentice school can only produce, so many people. The demand for those workers has far exceeded the capacity of the apprentice school to produce tonnage, if you will, in terms of their contribution to that shipbuilding tonnage. If you look at what we've, submarines, the submarine industry is the poster child for this, where we have gone from, in about a 14-year period, we're going to basically quintuple the amount of submarine tonnage we expect that industry to produce, and everybody saw that coming. I don't think anybody would say that who followed that issue, they didn't see that coming, but that didn't change the fact that the capacity was so large that it had to be grown, and it is a difficult capacity to grow for all the reasons we've been talking about, which is why that it hasn't been enough.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Commander Mike Hogan. I'm the Navy Fellow at the Atlantic Council. My question's for Mr. Pontrelli. Your conversation about GM and the amount of capital investments they have, I find fascinating. They're in a very competitive industry with a lot of direct peer competitors, whereas a ship class is kind of, there's one company that builds this class of submarine, there's one company that builds that class of aircraft carrier, et cetera, et cetera. So outside of the subsidies you talked about, is the right answer like what Han was doing of investing in Philadelphia shipyard, revitalizing it, and creating what could eventually be a competitor? Or how else can we incentivize those industries to make those capital investments to improve downstream?
Yeah, so I mean, again, on the private side of the house, it's just, there's the reality of their financial structure and environment they live in. They have income statement and balance sheet, and they've got to deal with Wall Street to maintain their relationships with the banking community. And, as we go over some of these numbers, to be able to put CapEx in, you have 5 things you can do with your capital allocation budget. You can dividends, share buybacks, I can acquire companies, I can pay down debt, and I can do CapEx. I have to get a weighted average cost of capital return on that, otherwise I'm destroying value in the company, and it is highly risky to do. And to put that money out, I've got to get the rate of return in a period of time that makes sense. So that's where I'm coming down to. All these other ways to incent these companies have been tried, and given the size of the opportunity here and the critical nature of it, I'm back down to this point of the subsidy has to be the way to help drive that as part of this. GM and Ford, right, they also had their days where they had to go through and make these tough decisions on capital allocation, particularly in the late 70s and 80s. And they're not in a monopsony also, right? They don't have one customer, right, which is a part of the thing that makes us really unique. You mentioned the whole competitive environment.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. And by the way, that was a good question. Commander Mike Hogan is, for those of you who don't know, one of our Olmsted scholars on active duty, so selected for an overseas program where he learned a language, went to Turkey, appreciated the culture, got a degree, came back, and I'm glad to see Admiral Kilby out there, that we put him in a place where he can make a difference to the Atlantic Council, and then he's going to go back to the fleet and do great things. Thank you. I think we have time for one last question, sir. Are there 2 of you there? Yeah, we'll do, just state your question, and then you state your question. We'll do a rapid-fire response.
Hopefully mine's a fast one. Aaron Wiest, Maritime Industrial Base, Additive Manufacturing. How do we practically raise the wages of skilled laborers we trust sailors' lives to the level of people we trust to put meatballs on our sandwiches?
My question, Bob Pensick from Thermodynamica. The reason the GM is able to make some investments is they also have a large consumer base, right? Where individuals are buying cars as well as companies. As we think about how to make per unit economics make more sense for the Navy, is there a broader thought about revitalizing even our commercial shipping fleet? The economies of scale are a well-known phenomena, right? And if we're building ships for other customers other than just the Navy, it would make sense that those synergies would accrue to the Navy as well. Thoughts on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Jamie, can I tackle that first question real
Please
fast?
do, yeah.
First of all, the Navy is having the same sort of troubles that industry has. They have recruitment and retention problems as well. We could argue that pay needs to increase as well to address those problems. And the simple fact is that industry and the government are going to have to negotiate and come to an agreement amongst themselves of how we substantially, and I mean substantially, not $1 or $2 or $3 an hour, but maybe $10 or more an hour to raise the wages of shipyard workers, and then perhaps you have to do the same thing with personnel, with naval personnel as well at those junior grades. Because in the absence of that, we're just going to continue getting more of the same, which is an evergreen labor force. Now, is that going to make ships more expensive in the near term? Yes, it will. Ships are already getting more expensive in the near term because we're taking a lot more labor to do a job because the workforce isn't as skilled, there's more rework, and there's more management oversight. So there's going to be a transition period until we get the retention up and the skills up, and then hopefully you see labor hours start to come down again, even if those labor hours are more expensive.
I'd add one thing on that. I think it's an obvious point that we understand that the manufacturing wage base is exposed to a global wage, and making a meatball sub is not. That's the fundamental economic issue, right? And that's what's dragged down the manufacturing wages, like it or not. And, you know, this is what's happened in the rest of the commercial market space is those manufacturing jobs that are here can generate a substantial wage for those employees up until at some point where it's not competitive. And so it's going to just have to be a straight up, we're just going to pay these people a lot of money because I can't build my submarines in the Philippines, I can't build them in India, and I can't build them in China. So that's just the way it is. And so you're going to have to subsidize them. I don't want to just come back with some trite answer, but you can pretend like you're going to swim upstream against the global economy, but you're just not going to do it.
Yeah, on the second question, on foreign military sales, the group will probably have an answer for you, but, you know, that is exactly the way to get to an economy of scale and make things cheaper and more lucrative for the United States. People want our stuff. We have the best equipment, the best guarantees and warranties, the technical support and the parts support. You just look at the F-35, you know, everybody wants it. It's expensive. We build ships for the Saudis. We build ships for the Egyptians. We could potentially have a foreign military sale for the Constellation-class frigate, and that would certainly give us a diversification of places to go for dry docks and for parts support, and also just for that intercultural, you know, woven bind with another ally or partner. Any comments from you on that, or anybody else? No? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much for your attention and coming today. It's been a great crowd.